I thought I understood the line between right and wrong, until the one I raised as my own touched the loneliest part of me. I should have pulled away when his hand brushed my leg, but I stayed motionless, unsure why. I merely shut my eyes. And then he spoke. "I simply wish for you to feel no more pain." It seems innocuous, doesn't it? Yet that single sentence stirred a long-buried emotion within me. From that moment forward, I realized I had transformed into someone entirely different. If you have ever muted your emotions in the pursuit of what is deemed right or wrong, I invite you to remain here with me. This narrative transcends mere feelings of guilt. It concerns the realities we hesitate to voice openly. If this tale resonates with you, be sure to click that subscribe button. There is an abundance I wish to convey, far beyond what has been expressed. They called it a miracle that I emerged unscathed. 3 years prior, a semi-truck collided with the passenger side of my car, sending it tumbling 3 times. When I finally opened my eyes 2 weeks later, I found myself encumbered by rods in my legs, screws in my hips, and a relentless pain that seemed to carve itself into every fiber of my being. The physicians remarked that the situation could have turned out far more dire. They remarked on your fortune, claiming you were fortunate to still be breathing. Yet, when the sensation in your legs fades and assistance is required merely to rise from the confines of your bed, the notion of being lucky takes on a harsh edge. I lost more than mere mobility. I have lost the essence of the woman I used to be. The mornings fell into a hush. My body has become an unfamiliar entity. What reflections greet me when I gaze into the mirror? A visage unknown. I became a figure of pity in the eyes of others. In the hushed corners of grocery stores, they spoke of her in murmurs. Once, she radiated vitality and exuberance. Such silence is undeserved by anyone. At that moment, he stepped through the threshold of his home. Wow, it stands taller than I remember. Stronger. No longer just a boy. He moved effortlessly through the house, radiating a sense of calm assurance. His voice lowered, hands unwavering as he effortlessly lifted me from my seat. In the stillness and pain, I sensed something stir inside, a confusing warmth I wasn't ready for. Not only cared for, but truly seen and moved, I understood. I had no desire for it. I certainly did not anticipate that turn of events. At times, the journey to healing emerges from the most unforeseen sources. At the age of 17, I affixed my signature to the documents that irrevocably bound me to the role of his mother. It was never destined to endure. It was designated as a temporary foster placement, only until his true family resolved their matters. Time slipped away, transforming fleeting months into the passage of years. By the time he reached the age of 5, there was no one left to show up for him. At the threshold of adulthood, I nourished him, cleansed him, and transformed bedtime tales into vivid experiences with my animated voices and sound effects. He addressed me as Mom before I was prepared to bear its significance. As time passed, it gradually started to resonate with a sense of belonging. It is now officially in our possession. I find myself in the midst of my 40s now. Life possesses an uncanny ability to upend the roles you once thought were immutable. After the accident, I found myself compelled to part ways with my position at the community library. Driving was beyond my reach. The stairs loomed before me, an insurmountable challenge I could not face. My body betrayed me in the most intimate of ways, from the simple act of washing my hair to the everyday necessity of getting dressed and using the toilet. Humbling only begins to touch the depths. Without a moment's hesitation, he leaped back in. It was merely a temporary measure until you found your strength again. Yet deep down, we both understood that I wouldn't. Our snug Vermont house sits at the terminus of a dim, icy street, seldom graced by the gentle touch of winter sunlight. The heater persists in its relentless clicking, a constant interruption in the quiet of the room. The windows fog over. On most days, the sky resembles a murky dishwater. On certain nights, the wind howls with a fierce intensity, causing the house to echo as if it were lamenting. Only the two of us, in this moment together. He manages everything, from selecting groceries to crafting exquisite meals and even ferrying me from bed to bath and back again. He shares his humor to bring a smile to my face and gently reminds me to take my medication. He has never once made me feel like a burden. That doesn't imply I lack the sensation of being one. A distinct solitude envelopes you when your body seems to slip from your grasp. Serene essence, fervent. It feels as though the world wiped you from existence the moment you no longer served a purpose. There was a time when I stood in the limelight. There was a time when I was sought after. Now, the reflection in the mirror reveals a stranger, cast adrift like any other evening. As I sank into the couch, a dull ache pulsed through my legs, the chill seeping into my very bones. He knelt beside me, deftly rolling up my sweatpants to just above my knees, his warm, calloused hands making contact with my skin. In this confined moment, he inquired gently, immersing himself in the taut fibers of tension. I nodded, suppressing the impulse to concentrate on the way his fingers danced, both assertive and tender. His presence, more than anything else, eased the pain in a way medicine never did. Yet on this occasion it seemed distinct. His hand moved slightly, and somehow that tiny motion changed how the moment felt. He touched near my waist, and it brought a rush of old, buried emotions I didn't know still lived inside me. My breath hitched, and his did too. We both froze in that moment, unsure how to interpret the tension that filled the room. The atmosphere was thick, charged with an unspoken tension, as though the very walls were poised, waiting for our next action. Apologies escaped his lips as he pulled his hand back, the warmth lingering on my skin, a fierce reminder of his touch. "No," I exclaimed, my breath coming in quick bursts. All was well, his eyes lifted to mine, revealing uncertainty. He nodded, then gently pulled the fabric down, his hand briefly brushing my leg. "You're fine," he whispered. It was an assertion. I gave a subtle nod. I found myself in a state of discontent. A transformation lingered, unleashed and fragmented. The silence returned, yet it bore a different weight, a heaviness that seemed to envelop everything around it. Considerably more significant. I sensed it upon my skin, deep within my chest, where his hand had wandered close. After a long hiatus, I turned my attention to the possibilities that lay before me. I found myself reflecting on my lingering desires. That night shifted the dynamics between us in a way I couldn't yet explain. He supported me gently, as he often did, but now I noticed the emotion behind it. The way our hands touched lingered in my mind far longer than expected. I started to observe details that had previously escaped my attention. The defined line of his jaw as he concentrated. His gaze would warm and soften whenever it rested upon me. He gazed, reaching further than ever before. There were instances when he thought I was oblivious to what was unfolding. One morning, he assisted me out of bed as he always did, his arms cradling my back with a gentle and cautious touch. As I leaned in, his hand brushed against mine, a fleeting connection, and we lingered in that moment. It was merely an instant, perhaps even less than that. I sensed it deeply. His fingers coiled with tension before unwinding into ease. My heart pounded in my chest. The conversation was overlooked. It was a topic that remained untouched between us. Restlessly, I shifted and turned throughout the night. A dull ache pulsed through my legs. Perhaps there was an essence that transcended mere physicality. In bed, I gazed at the ceiling, attuning myself to the gentle murmur of the house. In an unexpected moment, the door let out a haunting creak as it swung open. "Your light was still on," he murmured, leaning against the doorway, his hair tousled and his eyes weighed down by sleep. I found myself unable to drift into slumber. I murmured softly. He entered without a word, casually settling beside me at the edge of the bed. "Should I remain here until you feel prepared?" I inclined my head in assent. He leaned back against the headboard. His elongated limbs stretched out beside me. I turned onto my side, my gaze fixed intently on him. His eyelids fluttered momentarily. His chest rose and fell, a rhythm both steady and serene. Before long, he lay still, his body enveloped in warmth and silence. I stayed beside him, uncertain whether the quiet between us was comfort or avoidance. My hand lingered near his, not quite touching. I stared at the ceiling, hoping the answers would appear among the shadows cast by the dim light. Sleep never came. My mind replayed every detail, every breath, every moment of closeness that passed between us. By morning, the line between duty and desire had blurred into something I could no longer define. He stirred awake, blinking slowly, and offered a faint smile. "Morning," he whispered. I nodded, my voice still lost in the whirlwind of last night. I sat up and adjusted the blanket over him. As I turned to leave, he reached for my wrist gently. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said, his voice calm, but full of meaning. I didn't reply. Not yet. I just nodded again and stepped out of the room, the echo of his words following me into the hallway. I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to keep my hands moving while my thoughts remained fixed on the night before. The clang of a spoon, the hum of the refrigerator, the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, all drowned beneath the noise in my mind. When he joined me moments later, his hair damp from the shower, I offered him a cup of coffee without a word. He took it and sat down across from me at the table. We ate in silence. The kind of silence that says everything without saying a thing. Our fingers brushed as we reached for the butter. Neither of us pulled away. "Are we okay?" he finally asked, not looking up. I took a deep breath. I don't know what we are, but I know this, whatever it is, it didn't come from nowhere. It didn't just appear last night. He nodded slowly, digesting my words like he would the toast in his hands. "I've felt it too," he admitted. "For a long time." We didn't speak again for a while. But something had shifted, undeniable and irreversible. The air between us held the weight of recognition, not shame. I arranged the table, filled the cups with coffee, and engaged in light conversation, maintaining the facade of normalcy. My hands trembled as I offered him the butter. "Thank you," I replied swiftly as he handed me the plate. He noted softly, "That's the third time you've mentioned it." I donned a cheerful facade. "Gratitude fills my heart." He lingered in silence before replying, observing me from across the table, his eyes shrouded in enigma. "Do you find yourself longing for a different choice?" At long last, he inquired. I found myself immobilized, unable to move. The blade in my grasp lingered just above the slice of toast. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I don't know where we'll go from here. I only know that truth has a way of finding light, even in the most unexpected places. This is not a story of forbidden love. It's a story of survival, of connection, of rediscovery. And if you've ever stood at the edge of what you once believed was unthinkable, perhaps you understand. Perhaps you've been there too.